Hi everyone, it's Lisa here. I'm back with a video for you today, and I'm delighted to be over on the Foiled Fox blog today. I'm going to link to their blog below and also to their online store, but I was delighted when they asked if I would like to guest on their blog. And today I'm going to be sharing two cards with you using the Altenew Antique Engravings die, super pretty die, and also I'm going to be playing with their watercolors. That's the 36 half pan set that's been out for a little while now, so I'll talk a little bit about those in a moment. I'm going to start by just doing a very quick review of the watercolors themselves, and I'm trying a different style of video today. I'm going to do part of it live and part of it with a voiceover just to see how that works out. So this bit I'm just going to talk to you as I see the colours. Now, it's not the first time I've opened the box, as you'll see, and I have played with the colours, and there are plenty of in-depth reviews out there on these watercolours, so I'm not going to review everything in detail, but I will just give a quick opinion as I go through the video on how I actually found using the watercolours. So first of all, I got two boxes, and I've thrown the box away for this one, but it just comes in a similar style to this with pan case on it. And when I first opened the boxes, I discovered that one of them actually doesn't open properly. So this was the one that doesn't open properly. You can see it doesn't lay flat, and that was the one that my watercolors actually came in. So that was a little bit disappointing when I opened them, because of course you want the lid to lay flat if possible. But when I opened up the pan case box and took this pan case out, it does lay flat. So I just switched my watercolors from this one into this one. So as you can see, they're half pans, there's 36 of them. They're really pretty colours, and they match the colours of their inks. So if you're a fan of Altenew, you'll really like the colours that are included, and I do think the colours are very pretty, very suitable for card making, particularly for florals, as you would expect with Altenew. It comes with a brush. This is a fine tip water brush. I won't be using that today. I actually use some different brushes and some water. And I created a swatch, and I used Arch's cold press cardstock to create my swatch, because that's mostly what I watercolour on. So you can see here they're really beautiful colours, and my first impression was that they activate really easily. So when you put your brush into the pigment and your wet brush into the pigment, you can really get the colour moving very quickly, and they are kind of I've heard them compared to Gansai. I'm not sure that I'm totally convinced they're as creamy or as rich as Gansai, but they do have quite an intense pigment, and you do need to be quite careful when you put your brush in how much pigment you actually pick up, because some of the colours are quite intense. So that was my first impression. I think they're a fantastic price point. I think in the US they sell for about $35, $36, about £28 over here in the UK. So that makes them really quite good value, and they are half pans, which I find, you know, they're okay to use. It's a little bit easier if you've got a full pan, I guess, if you're using bigger brushes like a wide flat brush or something, and you're using straight from the pan. But it really wasn't that big a deal, because I'd rather have more colours, I suppose, than bigger pans. So that was my first impression of the kind of packaging and the setup, the colours. There's loads of information on the Altenew website around their light fastness. They are supposed to be good in that respect, so once you use them you won't lose the colour on your card quickly. I haven't tested that yet, but that's what they're saying, and they are a mix of opaque and transparent. So anyway, that's a very quick review of them, and I shall now move on to the actual cards themselves. I started off by pre-cutting some panels from Archie's cold press watercolour cardstock. These are actually 5 by 5 pieces, but they're going to be trimmed to 4.5 by 4.5 for the actual final panel. And I'm using 4 of the little pans from the set. I'm using Crimson, Warm Sunshine, Bamboo and Forest Glades, and I've taken them out of the casing for the purposes of the video because it's hard to get everything in the frame otherwise. So I'm using a wet on wet technique, which just basically means that I lay down my clean clear water first. I'm using a flat brush which is 3/4 inch wide, so that puts quite a lot of water down onto the cardstock in one go, and I made sure that it was pretty wet before I started adding the colour to it. So as I say, that I've worked through the Crimson, Warm Sunshine, Bamboo and Forest Glades colours. I'm going to do 3 layers of this. So my first layer actually starts off quite soft, and I heat set that in between, and I do that for each of the times that I add the layers. You can of course leave your panels to dry in between. Most people I don't think are that patient, and especially when you're doing 3 layers of colour, you generally tend to use a heat gun to speed up the process, but you do lose a little bit of vibrancy when you air dry or when you use your heat gun. So for my purposes for this card, I definitely think that I needed the 3 layers. And actually, I think if I did this panel again, or I did this card again, I would actually not do the watercolouring on the diagonal. I'd do it from top to bottom. I did do a draft of this card first, and I really liked the movement from the top right to the bottom left. But when I trimmed this panel down, when I was doing the video, I actually lost a lot of that crimson, which I felt was a real shame. So I think it would have been better from top to bottom. So I'm just going to remove the tape now, and then I'm going to start on the next panel. So for this panel I use 4 different colours from the set, and I'm using Lavender Fields, Coral Berry, Sun-Kissed and Fresh Lemon, and I've sped this second panel up because you've seen the process in the first panel that I showed you, so I'm just going to speed this up and make it a lot quicker. But I started with Lavender Fields at the top. Coral Berry I blended into that for my second colour. Coral Berry is actually my favourite of their colours, so I was really excited to use that today. And then I added the Sun-Kissed and then the Fresh Lemon, and I do 3 layers again. I dry in between with the heat gun. So as I'm adding the layers, you can see that I'm going backwards and forwards, and I'm just blending it out using some water in between, just so that that actually comes it just looks a lot smoother. But you'll find when it dries out anyway that it actually doesn't, you don't really see those lines that at the moment look a little bit obvious. And this is definitely my favourite of the panels, although it does die back a little bit softer. I really like the vibrancy in this panel. So moving on to the die cutting, this is the Antique Engravings die. It's really, really pretty. It's very delicate. You do definitely need to use a shim when you run it through the die cutting machine, and I had to pass it through a couple of times, particularly if your cardstock's a little bit thicker. And I do use 110 for one of my cards, and this is actually a gold satin cardstock. So as you can see, I'm poking these out quite easily, but I did have to use the shim, and I did run it through a few times. And this frame around the edge is really, really thin. It's very, very pretty, but I didn't need that, so I decided to cut that off, and you'll see that I've got the white one there ready. Moving on to the window now, I'm taking the 5th largest circle die from the Hero Arts Circle Infinity set, and I'm using 2 different cardstocks here. This is actually a kind of ivory pearlescent card, and I'll try to link to something similar if I can in the description below. It's really pretty. You can really see the shimmer in this frame here, and the other panel's just a Nina 110. So I run those through the die cutting machine, and I start to assemble the actual window frame. I added some Ranger Multi-Medium to the back of these window panels, and both of them are exactly the same. And I pressed that down actually onto the die cut. In hindsight, I probably would have used a double-sided tape behind, but I wanted to pull a couple of the leaves out to the front and stick them so that they weren't all tucked behind. I thought it would look prettier if they actually had a few outside of the frame. So it was really fiddly because the die is really delicate, but you know, it is possible. It just takes a little bit of manoeuvring and fiddling around, but I do manage to get them the way that I wanted them. And I used the pearlescent card with the gold die cut, and the white Nina I just use with the plain white die cut. So you can see I'm messing around here, just making sure that I add little drops of Ranger Multi-Medium matte, and I set them with an acrylic block. Here I'm just trimming off the die where it overhangs the edge of the cardstock, and I'm now just going to move on to pulling the final cards together. So I've put some double-sided tape onto the back of my watercolour panels, and I'm removing that now, and I'm going to adhere those down onto some white base cards. These are 5 by 5 inches and they're Nina £110, so both of those are adhered now. I added a healthy amount of foam tape onto the back of each one, and now I'm just going to remove those and pop those down onto the base cards. Apologies for my head getting in the way here. It's always tricky when you're on camera and you're trying to line things up and you want them to be just right. Lastly, I just need to add my sentiments, and I use two different sets for this. One is Altenew label Love, and I'm going to heat emboss this one, so I stamp it onto some white Nina £110 cardstock, and I add some Versamark ink, and I'm going to use the Altenew Platinum embossing powder on this one. I think it tones really nicely with the gold die cut, so I'm just going ahead and stamping that down, and then I'm going to add my powder and heat set that. The magic of heat embossing never gets old, does it? And I think this is a really, really pretty colour, and as I say, it looks really nice against the gold die cut. For my second sentiment, I'm using Altenew's Beautiful Day. I'm taking one of the sentiments from that. I'm stamping this with VersaFine Onyx Black onto white cardstock. I'm a little bit out of frame here, but I'm just stamping it. There's nothing fancy going on. But I did wonder whether to do white heat embossing on black cardstock. I just felt that it would have been a bit heavy, so I went with the black on white in the end. And now I'm just mounting the two sentiments up. I adhere them actually, the first one with double-sided tape, and the second one I actually popped up instead with some foam tape. And I mess around a little bit here trying to decide where to put it, but in the end I went with a similar position to the first card. I added a few sequins to the card on the left, as you can see there, just to give it a little bit of sparkle, but I didn't think the card on the right needed that. I thought it looked really pretty with the gold and the pearlescent card anyway, so I just left that one without sequins. That finishes my two cards for today. I hope that you enjoyed watching, and of course a huge thank you to Foiled Fox for having me as their guest. I really enjoyed creating for them. I will link to the Foiled Fox blog post where you'll see more details of the cards over there, and I'll also link to their online shop, and I'll provide links as well to all the products that I've used in this video in the description below. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll be back again soon.